This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest Alabama's Agriculture Commissioner, Rick Pate. Rick's a good friend of mine, and he's been on the show several times. He didn't remember he'd been on the show. Rick's getting up in age like me. Forget, this is about your third appearance on the show. Rick said, I don't know if I've ever done the show before, doing radio, but this is his third or fourth appearance. I'm sure he was on when he ran the first time and then been on over the years. But, you know, people don't realize what an important position Rick's in. Agriculture is still our number one industry. Wouldn't you say, Rick? It
is. Yeah, economically. You know, a lot of times in Alabama, we love to, announce some hiring of spending $100 million and hiring 200 people, but the aggregate effect of agriculture in this state is just tremendous. I mean, and it helps. It's everywhere in the state. It's not like you put a plant in one town and it impacts that area around it. You know, agriculture holds most of our rural communities together.
You know, Rick, you have been around agriculture all your life, haven't you?
Yeah, my dad we had 4 poultry houses, and he was always
here in Montgomery, the Lowndes
County.
Lowndes County.
But he was a typical rural mail carrier. Back then they had those little routes where he'd carry for 4 or 5 hours, and he'd be back for lunch every day. And Dad flew helicopters, retired as a colonel in the Guard. But he loved cattle in particular, because we had to have chickens to live sometimes. But he loved cattle, loved genetics and talking genetics, and really one of the first people I knew that really got into artificial inseminating. And he had registered Charolais cattle, and he was buying semen from all over the country.
Is that right? He would do that at that age? Had he gone to Auburn to study?
Yeah, he graduated from Auburn in animal science.
So he knew he'd do. He gone to school to learn it and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So he was born on a farm, and he figured he was going back to farming then.
Well, his dad was really a timber guy, and so back then, if you can imagine 30s and 40s, we didn't have the trucks we did, and so his family was in Pickens County, really Carrollton, and so my granddaddy, we called Pop, had to leave, and so they'd move that sawmill. They'd have the whole family, aunts and uncles and brothers of my grandmother, and I think they might have started out in banks, and then they'd cut as far out as the mules could haul those logs back, and then they'd a lot of times buy land, and so every time they moved, though, they'd leave a few family members behind. Somebody's daughter would fall in love with some local boy, but yeah, Dad was born down in Pate County in Banks. And
he was born in Banks. I didn't know that.
Lived in Beatrice. There was a Pate lumber mill there.
Pate County is my home. You know that.
Yeah, you did know that. Yeah. But and then they ended
up. So your
in
folks were born in. Your daddy granddad was in Banks. Which one was it?
My granddaddy was born in Pickens
on your mama
County.
On your mama's side?
No, on my dad's side. My mother's family was all from Calhoun County.
Calhoun,
Yeah, and so,
how'd y'all get to the Lowndes then?
Well, because innovation caught up to us in Lowndes County, so they moved to Lowndes in say the '60s. And of course, by then, Pop had made a little money, and Dad was sort of that 5th child that was 5 years behind the 4th one, and they sent him to Stark in Montgomery to boarding school. But I don't think the trucks got available, and so we never moved again because you didn't need to tear the sawmill down and move anymore. So I think we had one in Prattville, one in Lowndes County in St. Clair, and a little north of Lounsboro, and so anyway. And
who was your ancestor from Banks now? Was that on your mama's side?
Nobody. They just moved the family and buy land.
And they had some land in Banks.
Well, they might not have any. They might just go down there and buy it, and then buy the timber, and then they'd cut out as far as those mules could haul it back in, and then they'd tear the sawmill down.
So really and truly, you were your family was in mostly timber then.
Till Dad, but Dad never wanted to do that. And so Dad went to Auburn and studied agriculture, and my 2 uncles were both in the sawmill business with my granddaddy, but Dad never did.
Sawmill then, huh?
Yeah.
But your dad never did that. Now, did you have any siblings?
I have 4 siblings, there's 5 of us, yeah.
Now, all of them in Lowndes County, they spread out now?
No, my brother is, and he's a veterinarian, probably the only veterinarian in Lowndes County. And then he has a large and small animal practice, and actually was a vet for the Montgomery Zoo for decades and decades, so he can work on a giraffe or an elephant or a tiger, anything. But anyway, my sisters are all spread out. One's married and moved to Shelby County, and her husband works for the power company in environmental stuff. And then one sister's, my brother-in-law's died, but they were in a ministry. It's sort of like Campus Crusade. It's called Navigators. She's still involved in that. And then the third sister's in Auburn. Her husband builds houses, sells houses.
Rick, now you went on to Auburn, didn't you?
I did.
You major in agriculture?
Well, I started out, we had that family sit-down meeting where Dad called me in one day, and of course, it's kind of we had always been told, because my mother's daddy told her he didn't have a lot of money. He said, your inheritance is going to be your education, and that's all I can ever promise you, and you make your own.
Your mom and daddy told you that?
My mother's daddy told her, and so my parents had always told us, we'll educate you, and then that might be all you ever get from us. And so it's real important for them to get us all through school. But anyway, with my older brother getting in vet school, and then me stuck it, and then two sisters right behind me. There was only 5 years between the four of us.
That's a pretty expensive proposition for
them. And so
Dad
set me down by my junior year and said, you need to get out of agriculture. And we were going to have to sell some land to get us all through school. And so I got in horticulture, which was...
And that's what you did?
And so that's what I did, and it worked out really well for me.
You know, Rick, you was talking about that. Now, let me back up, though. Is Julie a Lowndes County girl?
No, she's from Watauga, though, so she's right across the river, but there's no bridge unless you go to Prattville.
How did y'all start dating? Did y'all want to go meet in Auburn?
Actually, my friend that you know, Jordan Plaster, brought her to one of my baby sister's weddings, and they grew up together in Watauga.
Jordan from Watauga, that's right.
And so, we just met then. And
I love Jordan.
Yeah.
Now, his brother works for you, doesn't he?
Yeah, Bob, I just left him. He's my assistant commissioner.
He's been over there in the department for a long time. He's a long time.
No, he's retired from Alpha, the insurance side.
Oh, that's right, yeah. I knew I saw him over at Alpha a lot.
And he started helping me almost the day he retired.
Now, Jordan's older than Bob, though, isn't
he? That's right.
I knew their daddy.
Yeah, Mr. Plaster, he was a card man.
He was one of the first people who came to see me when I got elected to the legislature. Worked for the paper company up there, I think, or something. No, he had the soil conservation.
Yeah, when he left the legislature, he went to work for soil and water.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that's how you majored in that, horticulture, and then Jordan Plaster introduced you and Julie at Auburn when y'all were at Auburn?
No, he brought Julie to one of my sister's weddings.
Okay.
And so I met her through him. And
She's
they
a
weren't
pretty
dating.
lady.
Well, thank you.
Now, how many children y'all have now?
We have 2 sons, and we've got them both engaged, so we're thrilled. Richard's...
One of them's a doctor. He's going to be a doctor.
One's a doctor, and he's doing his 3rd year residency in Chattanooga, and then the other one's done real well. He got a building science degree and went to work for Cadell, and they sent him to Saudi Arabia, and he worked there a couple of years on the embassy, and then he left there, went to work in Stuttgart, Germany for an American company. He was working at American bases, and now he's in Sicily and Catania, and he's working at Naval Command for the Mediterranean. And so he's gotten these high security clearances where he can see the plans of these really sensitive buildings, and because obviously they don't want everybody to know how the communications work. And so
Which
both
one's
of them,
older? Which one's older?
The one in Sicily is a little older, and he's actually getting married.
Both of them go to Auburn?
Yes, sir. Both of them graduated from Auburn.
You were there when Pat Sullivan and Terry Beasley were there.
Well, I came the year they left.
They finished the year
I
you left.
started in 70.
You're 3 years behind me, and they were a year ahead of me in school.
But I went to my senior year, went to the Bama punt game. I was in high school, but so I guess I started the fall of '73.
They were a heck of a tandem. Pat Sullivan was a good guy too.
Yeah.
Terry Beasley was probably the best athlete I ever saw.
He was tough, man. He'd take a lick.
He would take a lick, and it wound up hurting him in the latter part of his life.
It did.
But he was the best receiver in that generation I've ever seen. And you remember growing up in this area how Lee and Lanier dominated sports.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they won everything. It was the Lee Lanier game was the state championship game in football, and then the basketball too, and track too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, of course, Tom Jones that was the coach at Lee forever,
Yeah.
was a Lowndes County resident. So
Was he a Lowndes County
He was
resident?
at Hameville before he went to Lee, and then later in his career he came back to Lowndes Academy, and coached.
Oh, he
again.
coached his last years at Lowndes Academy?
Yeah. And so he died in Lowndes County. I mean, he had a place on the Tallawassee Creek, just less than 2 miles away from us.
He built a legacy. Hey, back to your majoring in horticulture. Let's get into that, if you would. That's what you did for your profession. You own a landscaping company.
Right.
You know, talking about that, we get back to your business and everything. You know, we were on this. I know you were on this show. We were talking about this because we brought this subject up, and I've read about it. Besides that landscaping, which is considered agricultural, is so important now to all the suburban communities that I want to say landscaping, or whatever you call it, horticulture is the biggest agriculture thing in Mobile now, because of all the school, all the houses, big houses and nice houses in Malwin and Mobile County. I read them.
It was just a hub. I don't know how it got started, really, in Sims and that area, Wilmer. Yeah, but Lizzie is obviously, they grew really well down there, and so there more people, and so, yeah, forever. I'd say probably Mobile County still probably the Zay capital of the United States.
I didn't know this. That's why it comes up, landscaping. Is that how when you classify agricultural?
Yeah, nursery crop production.
Nursery.
Would be considered part of that, yes, sir.
And nursery was like #1 in Mobile several years ago.
That probably could have been true, yeah. And of course, you got Flowerwood down there in Loxley. That's probably the biggest container nursery I know of. I mean, maybe they're bigger in other parts of the country, but they're huge, and they got 4 or 5 locations, and yeah, really successful.
Do you monitor all that stuff, don't you, as agriculture?
Well, we really monitor plants moving across state lines, and so we're not there monitoring to see if the plants look good or what they're selling them. But yeah, if you want them, and they do move a lot of plants across state lines, and so yeah, we have to inspect that soil, make sure they're treated right, because we don't want another thing like fire ants that came in through the Port of Mobile, and then before we knew it, back in the 40s and 50s, we'd let that thing get in about 20 states, you know, and I think the precautions are in place now. Maybe we would have caught some of that, or we could have slowed it down a lot more. But yeah, we look for certain diseases or certain things. Like Alabama has been free of citrus canker. There's another disease, citrus greening, that's really bad in Central Florida. They've actually lost their whole grapefruit industry in Florida, and so we're trying to keep that Alabama. So yeah, I've got the responsibility to whether to quarantine. We've found it in Baldwin County. Do we quarantine the whole state? Do we quarantine? Those are normally my decisions. How do we try to prevent it from moving?
Rick, what about, I ask you this every time. What are the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 agricultural industries in Alabama? Is poultry still #1?
Well, depending on how you rank them, by far timber is, if you consider that agriculture. Dollar-wise, yeah, and the capacity we have and the amount of wood fiber that we produce. But then poultry's a strong second. And then there's a pretty good drop-off down to you get the calf operations and cotton and soybean. I think cotton might be after.
Cotton be third, you think?
Yeah, but it's like I said, it's dropping pretty fast. Timber's way up here, poultry's here, and then you get into cotton, cow, calf, beef. And
it's cotton all over, ain't it? Cotton's
all over Alabama, yes, sir.
What area wouldn't have cotton, you reckon?
Well, not gonna see much in Coosa County and hilly countries. You got to have you don't want
flat land.
A 10-acre field. You need a bigger field, so you don't see as much in probably a Winston County or Cleveland County, maybe, where it's a lot more rolling land. But yeah, you get up in the Tennessee Valley, there's tons of it.
Well, that's where Huntsville was settled on it,
Yeah, and they're gobbling up a lot of it. But the Black Belt's all been pretty good cotton land.
You're talking about that. I went up to Huntsville for the FBI headquarters that Shelby brought to Huntsville. It's going to bring in 5,000 jobs. In the FBI headquarters, average salary $130,000 a year. But I got on a bus for Robert Adderholt in Caroline. Now, Caroline's father was agriculture commissioner, Albert McDonald. I knew Albert McDonald when he was a state senator. And I got on that thing. I just kind of looked out the window. We were on a bus driving to the thing. And I said, Caroline, was this land your daddy's land? She said, it sure was. It's funny, you're one of the few people who would know that. As we crossed miles of just beautiful, rich land that's now been eaten up by houses. Huntsville's grown so much that that was the best soil in the state other than right here for growing cotton.
Oh, yeah.
It may have been the best.
Soil.
That's why Huntsville was a state capital.
Yeah.
It was known as a cotton town.
Yeah.
It was known as a cotton town. When you and I were little boys, or before that,
yeah.
You know. But her land, Albert McDonald, I said, she said our family came down from Tennessee. Everybody who settled that Huntsville area, they just migrated down from Tennessee. But in that instant, we walked riding across. She said, I remember my daddy riding me on a tractor on this land right out here. About the time I was asking her about that.
I think she might have been in high school or a teenager when he was commissioner, because I asked her one time, I said, would you like to come back and show me where you played you know, because she was young enough to have some memories, and it's the same building. I mean, we've done a few things.
That old Beard building.
Yeah.
You know, that brings me to this point I was going to bring up. You know, I respect you doing that job because that job has really garnered men of agricultural stature in my lifetime, mostly, who've run for it and gotten elected because they know and love agriculture. And they're doing it to run for that job, and they ain't got aspirations to use it as a stepping stone to run for governor. Going back to Richard Beard, he wanted to be agriculture commissioner. The building you in, Richard Beard building. I remember Macmillan Lane. Do you remember him?
Yeah, I remember him a little bit, and I certainly remember the name.
And then Albert McDonald did that. Albert served about 3 or 4 terms in the state senate, then became agriculture commissioner. Mm-hmm. And then, of
course, you had Jack Thompson,
was,
and then Charles Bishop, and then
now Bishop, I don't know that he really was a real farmer though. You know, I saw Bishop, his
and
wife.
Sparks, I'm not sure Sparks was really a farmer.
Either. I don't think those two
of course,
really
John
were.
McMillan came from more of a forestry background.
They did. McMillan had a forestry background.
Yeah, but we're not the Forestry Commission, so that's not anything.
No, I know that. But he had that same.
Yeah.
When you say timber is #1, so he came. I would say John ran, but John moved over to be treasurer after that, you know. And then I think a lot of John McMillan.
Well, I wouldn't be ag commissioner without John McMillan. I mean, John's who encouraged me to run. John, he never really came out and endorsed me, but he told people who was going to vote for me, and he certainly was a lot of help telling me who to go see and where I needed to be, and I would have never won without John McMillan.
He's one of my best friends. He's just a good man. You know, that family goes back before the state was Alabama. You know that Baldwin County?
In Stockton.
They settled in Stockton before Alabama was a state. Steve and I served in the legislature together for about 15 years. Rick, but you're doing it for the right reason. You want to be agriculture commissioner, and you and John both. And he preceded you, didn't he?
Yeah.
Then he went over to treasurer when you.
Yeah.
Who ran against you for ag commissioner?
Senator Dial.
That's right.
Well, I actually had 3. A guy
Did he get run
down
off
in
with you?
Baldwin, he did. But I led going into the runoff and won by about the same percentage I led.
You know, talking about, I was thinking we were talking about that, and this taught me a lesson on politics even in 1982. The first year I ran for the legislature was elected. One of my best lifetime friends, my mom and daddy's best friend, was Bubba Trotman. Bubba was from Troy, and you love Mr. Bubba. We all loved him.
He was one of the second or third people I asked for their endorsement.
I thought so, and I thought that he was one of my favorite men in the world. And he and my mom and daddy graduated high school together in Troy. And I was sitting, I had lunch or supper with Bubba one day up here in Montgomery when I was in the legislature, maybe soon thereafter or something. And I came home and I told my mom, I said, Mama, I believe Bubba Trotman's one of the finest gentlemen I've ever known in my life. And she says, Steve, he was just that way in high school. If you had to use the word gentleman,
he was.
He epitomized a Southern gentleman.
I'll tell you the
Had
story
impeccable
I'll
manners.
tell you the story about Mr. Bubba and my dad. So Dad was president of the Cattlemen's like in
He was
76, 77 or somewhere in there. But Mr. Bubba had been state president and gone on one of the, might be the only Alabamian that's ever served national president. But anyway, so Dad told my mama, and I think they were going to a meeting down in Monroe County. He said, now, don't take offense, but I'm going to do like Mr. Bubba does, and, you know, and he would love to kiss women. And
You would tell that?
No,
Daddy.
my daddy was telling me. He said,
Bubba loved to kiss women.
And so anyway, they go, and Dad does his thing, and they ride back, and he says, Mama, my mother wasn't talking to him, and he said, well, what's the matter? And she said, well, you were kissing all them women. And he said, well, I told you I was going to do it. And she goes, Bubba did it. And and my mother said, my dad said, well, Mr. Bubba didn't pick and choose like you did tonight.
So you didn't pick his ugly one.
Mr. Bubba would hug and kiss them all, you know. My mother thought Dad was picking and choosing too much.
But you know what? Back to that, where I was going with Bubba, we all loved him down here. He was a you know, icon. Everybody loved Bubba Trotman. And when he was running for agriculture commissioner, I said, he gonna carry that thing like crazy. But Albert McDonald beat him and I realized what it was. The votes were in North Alabama. We thought we didn't have no votes down here. You know, Bubba got beat 2-1. It was like the state was divided, and Bubba got about 80% of the votes in Montgomery South, and McDonald got 80% of the votes Birmingham North. That told me even in 1982, Rick, the votes are in North Alabama in this state.
But I think Mr. Bubba ran as a Republican, didn't he?
No, he still ran as a Democrat.
He did?
Yeah, we all knew he was all as a Republican. He still ran as a Democrat, though.
He did.
You could not win as a Republican at that time. So he ran as a Republican. Now, I tell you who did run in 82 as a Republican, Emory Farmer, ran against George Wallace. So he got beat like a drum, too.
Yeah.
He got beat 2-1 by Wallace because people weren't ready to vote for Republican yet.
Yeah.
Now it's just the opposite. You couldn't run as a Democrat and get elected.
Statewide.
You couldn't. I mean, anybody could. Nobody could get elected.
Well, we've been on the losing side forever because Mother, after Goldwater ran in '64, she had 5 kids. I think the oldest in '64, I would have been 9, so I would have been 10. So we were 10 down to, and she decided she was going to run for the Alabama House as a Republican.
In the '64 Goldwater?
Well, in '66. So she was inspired by Goldwater in '64, so she was going to run for the House. Well, back then, it's not like they reapportioned to the same numbers. It was a Lowndes, a Tallgrass.
Right.
It didn't matter how many people lived there. That's what
Lowndes had too many representatives for them.
But anyway, she finished. That was even before the blacks had joined the Democratic Party. So she actually finished a distant third. The Democrat won, and then I think he ran as a Black Panther, finished second in that House seat, and then Mother finished third. But Hal, my brother, actually went to Nixon's '72 National Convention as a young Republican. So we were always on the losing end for 40 years there until 2010.
Rick, back to that time though, Lurleen cut that 64 Goldwater landslide. We still stayed Republican in the state for president and Congress after 64, but with Wallace still staying in that Democratic primary and Lurleen running in 66, she in that 66 governor's race, she beat 12 men without a runoff.
Yeah.
12 men.
That Wallace's name was gold.
It was gold in 66. In 66, yeah. Now, you were mayor of Lounsboro before you...
for 14 years. And I ain't saying I never had to buy a yard sign, and nobody ever ran against me.
You read
And so the old mayor would die or move off, and we'd draw straws. And so, I remember it started out when I started, it was paid $50 a month, and I think when I left, I was getting $183.74 or something. But it... we had a water system, so we had a lot of stuff you had to take care of. So because people are so dependent on water. But
y'all still live down there, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Boy, you've had to travel the state, though, for this job, ain't you?
Yeah, it's been a great experience. And in fact, that's what I say John McMillan sort of talked me into it. He encouraged me. But Julie and I was playing wide, and we didn't know who would run. And so I said, let's take $100,000. I think I'd been in business 37 years by then. Both boys were out of college. I said, I think it'd be a blast. Let's spend $100,000 running from one end of the state to the other and talking. And, of course, then you do it, and you think, well, heck, we might even win this thing, you know. But that was never the first.
You were running for the fun of it.
I was running for the fun of it.
Well, you were going to meet a lot of people, though, wasn't you?
Yeah, and great people.
Did Julie go with you all the way?
No.
She couldn't do that.
No, she'd go with me about once a week, and Bob would ride with me about once a week. And
so Bob was campaigning for you? Bob Plaster was?
Yeah.
He'd retired from Alpha that time.
Right.
I love those two guys, Jordan and Bob. Don't you?
They are great.
They're good guys. And one of them loves Auburn much as anything, and one of them loves Alabama more than anything.
Yeah.
Jordan Plaster got a box in Alabama.
I know it. He
because he lives there and everything.
Yeah.
In Tuscaloosa. Always asked me to go to his ball game with him. I like to watch the games on television.
I went to the Auburn, Alabama game, I guess, 2 years ago. I'm not going to be able to go this year. But he invited me to come. But
Jordan did?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's hard. I get to about two, 3 Auburn games much. A lot of times a lot going on Saturday. I need to be on the road doing stuff. So. But
finishing your 6th year.
Yeah, I got about 2 months and a half on the 6th year. Yeah, I have 2. So, but I do want to talk some about some of the things we're doing at the department.
Well, I hate we take so much time. We ain't got about a minute. Hit on one quick one you're proud about.
Well, of course, the biggest thing we've done is really help our local farmers. And, you know, we were almost buying no local food. And so we actually got the legislature, now they're funding, I think, $550,000 a year. And we reimburse child nutritionists 20 cents every time they feed an Alabama child an Alabama grown product. That's been a huge success. And then we got 2 pots of money we were able to find from USDA. One was, I think, $15 million, the other was $5 million. One, we could buy local fruits and vegetables and give them to the food banks. That started during COVID, so we were giving them, it was a 3-year program, say $5 million every year. And then the second one that we got from USDA was about $5 million, and it was we were able to buy local fruits and vegetables and give it to the school system. And the reason that was particularly good because the group taking advantage of the first program was our more affluent schools. It was the Hoovers and Vestavia. But this second pot from USDA, it had a requirement that the schools had to have at least 50% on reduced lunches. And so we could sort of go back and backfill the Lowndes counties and Dallas counties and Sumter counties that didn't take advantage of that other money. So we've been awful proud of that. And Sweet Grown Alabama, something we stood up the very first year I was there. And you know, that because if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't even know where local food was. So that's been a tremendous value to Alabama folks.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm sorry we didn't have time to get into those programs more. Got talking about old-timey stuff, but we'll head back on if you don't mind sometime next year.
I enjoyed the talk, though.
Yeah. Folks, our guest tonight's been Agriculture Commissioner Rick Pate. He's a good man, doing a good job over there in agriculture. And we'll have him back on and talk more about these programs he's getting for the schools. We thank you for being here, and thank you viewers for watching. Hope you tune in again next week for Alabama Politics. Thank y'all. Thank you, everybody.
This has been Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, a production of Troy University Television. Opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Troy University, its administration, faculty, staff, or students.